telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
This is Sparta!
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park.
Wahoo! Welcome back to another episode of Easily Entertained. I'm your host, Bryson, and today we are going to be talking the Super Mario Bros. Movie. We're going to be talking about why it's doing pretty good, how the story is, and where they could really go with this new animation video game adaptation style. But before that, please give us a follow and a like so that you can get notified on all the latest episodes of this amazing podcast. All right, so let's get started. I think what we first got to talk about for the Super Mario Bros. Movie is the story, because I think typically Mario is a very typical story. They're usually all very samey, at least in the games. Typically, it's Bowser kidnaps Princess Peach and Mario has to go save her. That is usually the plot. Most of the games are like that, and you would kind of expect that to be the movie, but instead, Peach isn't kidnapped in this movie, which I think is kind of good that they didn't do that, because although it would technically be more correct to the source material, it doesn't really fit the modern world. Like, yeah, it works for the games, but in a movie, people don't want to see like a typical damsel in distress, so they made Peach's character a bit more independent. She's kind of a fighter, like almost a leader of a rebellion, essentially. Not exactly, because Bowser has his own kingdom and Peach has hers, but it kind of feels that way. It feels like they're head to head. And so I think that's kind of interesting that they chose to go this route. But the story also, it starts in Brooklyn. So the whole thing is really setting up the Mario universe, which I think is interesting because canonically, Mario and Luigi are from Brooklyn. And so it makes sense that they started off there. And I love that they have their own plumbing business and they want to help the people, and they end up trying to help someone, and then they get sucked into the Mushroom Kingdom, and then that's where the whole journey kind of starts off. They get split up, and Mario has to go save Luigi, and I think that's a good way to tell this story. I really liked how they did that, and I think going that way, it allows for more progression, because the movie is pretty short. Super Mario Bros. Is only 90 minutes, so it makes sense to split them up, and to explore this world, you have to have Mario go through the world, just like in the games, because that's how you have to do it in the games. Mario is usually going after Peach, and he has to go through all the different worlds and levels to save her. And in this case, it's for Luigi. And I think that is interesting how they did that, because they had to do it in a way that kind of fits more of the modern world. So they really had to take out that Peach being kidnapped, and instead Luigi is lost in Bowser's land and he's been captured. And so I think that makes for a more compelling story, especially because they've just started off. Like, it would have been kind of weird had they started this movie with Peach getting kidnapped and Mario doesn't have any ties to Peach. And he's like, oh, we got to go save her. That wouldn't make any sense. That would be more sensical for a future like sequel, for Peach to get kidnapped and then he goes after her, because they've already developed a relationship at that point. Because at the beginning of this movie, they didn't have a relationship at all. In fact, Mario had to be introduced by Toad to Princess Peach. So I think that makes more sense canonically, and it kind of supports like the brother bond thing. And I think it's a good way to start off the series, and they can go through the different worlds. They can meet DK, and you can see all the Toads and different lands and all the Easter eggs and stuff. And I think that's a good way to start off the Mario movie. And then having Bowser do the love story type route instead of trying to kidnap Peach, Because, I mean, he has done that a couple times in the games. I know the one I was particularly thinking of is Super Mario Odyssey, especially because of his outfit in this movie when he has like his white hat and his suit and he has the flower bouquet of the piranha plants. That is very much from Super Mario Odyssey. And I think there are some others where he gets or tries to marry Peach. I think in Super Paper Mario, he tries to do that. I'm almost positive. I don't think necessarily by his choice, but by the Count dude in that movie. I haven't played that game in forever, but I loved it. And so having Bowser like doing all this to hopefully impress Peach and get her approval and her hand in marriage, I think is a good way to do this first story for Mario, because you want to kind of go the classic route of, oh, Peach gets kidnapped and they have to go save her, but we need to establish things first. So I think going the route that Bowser is already in this world and so is Peach, and Bowser has like a crush on her and he's like, oh, I kind of want to do this all for her and then we can rule the world together. I think that's a clever way to do it instead of making Mario the Peach's savior kind of thing. I think that makes more sense. So I like how they did the story. It is pretty basic and it's kind of weirdly paced at times. There are certain scenes where I feel like things kind of drag out a little bit, and then there's scenes that go by really fast. They kind of just wrap things up. Like I think at the very end of the movie, they defeat Bowser and then it's like 2 minutes and they end the film. And they don't really establish where things are going to go next. Like, there's an idea, but it doesn't feel like they kind of wrapped everything up. They defeated Bowser, and it's kind of like the games, and we're done. It's that easy. And instead, you kind of want more of a movie where it wraps things up a little bit nicer. Like, what happened to the rest of the kingdom? What happens to DK? And all that stuff. And so, I think that would have been an interesting way to end it. But overall, I thought the Super Mario Bros. Movie was super fun. I loved it. It was way more enjoyable than I really was expecting, because I think we were all kind of going into it not expecting a lot, because it's the Mario Bros. Movie. The trailers kind of made it seem like it's going to be all right. It'll be watchable. Nah, it's like just a load of fun. And I think that is something that's like a big reason why it's doing so well, is because it's just a fun movie. I did a little small podcast with my friend Cormac and Reese the other day, and we were talking about the Mario movie, and Reese was saying something how we kind of just wish movies were just fun. Like, you don't have to go into it expecting it to be a big masterpiece. It doesn't have to be Spider-Verse or Endgame or Infinity War or Avatar, whatever. It doesn't have to be this grand spectacle, even if those are fun. Like Spider-Verse, I think, is both fun and a grand spectacle. But you can also just go to have fun. That's what movies are for. They're entertainment. You should just be able to go to a movie, like as soon as you hear about it, and just be like, this is just a fun movie. And I think that's a great way to do it. I think that's a big reason why it's doing so good, is it's just fun. It's a fun movie. You get to go and you will have a good time. And I think, granted, it is meant for kids. It's written in a way for kids, which doesn't inherently surprise me, because Mario is a franchise that's family friendly. It's for kids. It's one that anybody of all ages can play. So it makes sense that it's kind of targeted at that. But they also include a lot of things that hits the nostalgia for so many people. Because for those who grew up playing either the original games or anything from the 2000s or newer, there's enough for everybody. Everybody can have some fun with this. And it's things that you can enjoy without them being like fan servicey. So it's like the Toads being like, oh, like messing with Mario and being like, oh, sorry, the princess is in another castle. Or you get the Luma, or the little penguins that you would see occasionally throughout the worlds in different games. And I think that's good that they did that. They include all these references so that they can grab your attention. And I think in like the score, that is phenomenally shown, because a lot of it is kind of modernized versions, like more for a movie, of the scores from Mario. And depending on the scene, it is played well. Like there's one scene where Bowser is talking to Kamek and they're playing the piano, and it's the classic da 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 da. It's that tune that they're playing, which I think is genius because it fits the story. And if you played the games, you know it. You know that sound, like it's engraved in your brain. And I think that those kind of things that don't exactly pull you out, but they hit that little bit of nostalgia and like just memory from playing the games, I think is getting so many people to like it, because you get that small little hit of dopamine. You're like, oh, I remember this. I've played this and I remember seeing all this stuff and hearing this music. And I think it's these things that grab everything. And there are some things for people like myself that didn't actually realize they were full references, like the DK rap when Donkey Kong is introduced, because that is from the original 64 Donkey Kong. I never played that one. I think was it 64? I can't remember if it's the Nintendo 64 or the SNES. I think it's the 64 because I think it's the one that's actually 3D. So I think it's the Nintendo 64 Donkey Kong. But like that's in there, and I didn't know that was really a thing. And so like there's that service. You have a couple times throughout like the fight when Mario and Donkey Kong are making their way to Bowser, they do some like Smash Bros moves, which I thought was really interesting. I didn't notice it at first, and then watching some of it back later and my friend Reese pointing it out, I noticed that a lot of it were Smash moves, which I thought was really cool because it hints at these other games that they could maybe do later that everyone's kind of hoping they could do because it would just be a fun time. But it's these references, and it ties back to the original properties and all this stuff from modern games and older games that targets all audiences. And I think that's something that's making it do extremely well, because video game adaptations don't always do very well. I think good examples of that are like Sonic the Hedgehog. They do fairly decently, but it's not always the case. I feel like a good example of a bad one, people might kind of hate me for this, is Uncharted. I didn't really ever play the Uncharted games, but watching the movie, it just feels like an average action film. Like it doesn't feel like it's adapting a property, and maybe that's just me, just because I haven't played the games. Maybe there's a lot of references that I'm not understanding. Like I know like some of the references in there, it's like Nolan North is in there, but I don't know much else about it. So I can't exactly say anything for that for sure. I'm trying to think of any other video game adaptations that are like really bad. Because like Sonic the Hedgehog is not too bad. Like they're kind of average films, but they're fun. I think they're interesting. I think a really good adaptation, well, there's two. So you have The Last of Us, which is very recent. That one is really good. And then another animated one would be the Castlevania series. I really like that series on Netflix. I think that one does the games justice, and it does some things new so that you have a mix of both, because you want some of the stuff to be what you recognize, and then you want things to also be new. You want something different. You don't want a repeat of the exact same stuff over again. But I think it's all those things is kind of what's giving the Super Mario movie a step ahead. It's that nostalgia. It's all the references, it's everything. It's the cast. I think Jack Black as Bowser is great. Keegan-Michael Key as Toad. Chris Pratt as Mario is not as bad as people thought. Charlie Day as Luigi is fantastic. I think Anya Taylor-Joy, although she's wonderful, she is a great actress. She doesn't exactly sound like Peach. Like, granted, a lot of the characters don't sound exactly like we think of, but I think hers is like really obvious because she just sounds like Anya Taylor-Joy. And so that kind of pulls you out. But I think everything else is making the movie good. I think it's giving it that opportunity to be good, even though it's done by Illumination, which kind of sucks as a studio, but that's just me. But yeah, and then where I think they could go with this, they kind of set up several things to do spin-offs and sequels to this movie, which I think could be fantastic. They didn't exactly say things in particular, but it seems like the creators of the Super Mario movie did include things that could possibly lead elsewhere, like Luigi having a flashlight in Bowser's land when he first gets there, and you have like the kind of horror elements from all the dry bones, and so you can kind of tease Luigi's Mansion, which I think would be a great spin-off because it's just like a kind of Ghostbusters spin-off but with Luigi and he's just scared of everything. I think that would be super cool. You could have some other kinds of movies. Maybe you could do a Paper Mario movie. You could have Super Mario Galaxy, or just take elements from all these other games because there's so many Mario properties now. So it feels like that could make sense. And then you also have one that was kind of mentioned earlier is like Smash. You could do Super Smash Bros, which could be interesting, especially because if you get a good like Nintendo Cinematic Universe kind of set up to like getting different adaptations, you could have like Zelda, Metroid, Mega Man, you could have things like the Game & Watch or Rob, and like find ways to get all of these other characters and like bring in like Pokemon and things like that. You could possibly do a Smash Bros movie, and I think that could be kind of interesting. Plus, like, then we could also get all these other adaptations of classic games that are hopefully given the same level of detail that the Mario movie was. I think personally an adaptation that I think could be so cool, because we have like the ones that seem pretty obvious. Like I think The Legend of Zelda for sure could get a movie, but those are I think they're very story driven already. So it would be interesting to see if they come up with something new or remake an old story and adapt it a little bit differently for the screen, like Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild. There are some others, but I can't remember all of them because I haven't played all the Legend of Zelda games, even the one I have, which is Breath of the Wild. I have barely made it past the tutorial. But like Zelda seems fairly obvious. I think one that could be really cool is Metroid. I think that one would be really cool with Samus fighting aliens, just kind of like an alien style movie of just like having to fight aliens. And I don't remember the exact plot of Metroid. I can't remember why they're fighting aliens, but I think Metroid could just be a cool like action animated Nintendo movie. I think that would be interesting. It could be a better Lightyear. Because although Pixar is usually really good, I did not think Lightyear was it. And we could make Metroid a better version of Lightyear, essentially, and have like cool alien elements to it. I just think Metroid could be a really cool movie. And it's not as well known as Mario or Zelda, which I think could kind of benefit to it because you could probably tell a more original story with Metroid and like use the characters and kind of make something a little bit different and use like the same villains like Kraid, and it would kind of allow for some more creativity in like the storytelling aspects, but you could also still cater to that nostalgic audience who really liked the Metroid games, especially because it's not as gigantic of a property as Mario and Zelda is. Mario especially, because Mario's just the face of gaming as a whole. When you think of video games, you think of Mario almost guaranteed. It's like Mickey Mouse. Like Mickey Mouse is the face of animation. Mario is the face of gaming. That's what you think of. And so having something that still hits the nostalgia, but is a little bit lesser known, kind of like how Castlevania is on Netflix, I think that could make for a very interesting way for Nintendo to get more into the animation and movie scene, because it's not just their big hits. Because although I love Mario and I think they could do so many cool things with Mario, I'd like to give the smaller properties a shot and try out some new things. And I think that's what they're kind of doing with the Mario movie. It seems like they're setting up for sequels and spin-offs, and maybe we'll just get a lot more adaptations from Illumination, which I think could be better. We talked about this with my friend Reese and Cormac, about how Illumination does pretty decently on their adaptations. The Grinch was kind of divisive among a lot of people. I didn't mind it, but you have the Lorax as well. You have Horton Hears a Who, which I don't know if is specifically Illumination, but I think it's done by Universal, who does own Illumination, so it could have been like just prior to Illumination, but I can't exactly say that for sure. But now you have like the Mario movie, and it seems like they are good at doing adaptations more than original stories. So maybe they could just merge with Nintendo and just adapt a lot of the Nintendo properties. I think that could be really interesting to see, because then we could get a lot of our classic childhood games made into movies, because so many of us, when those games would come out, they're like, man, why don't they make movies for these things? You could have a Splatoon movie, which I don't know how they would do, but I feel like that could be interesting to see how they would want to do it. But then not only would that be good for like movies, because you could get these cool adaptations of different stories, Nintendo would skyrocket in their money making because the games are already out. And so that would probably just entice people to want to play the games more. I watched the Mario movie and I was like, man, I kind of want to play Super Mario Odyssey again, because it's just that kind of movie. It makes you want to play the games again. And I think that could be an interesting route for Nintendo to go if they want to do more adaptations. So I think it's interesting. It's cool to see where it's going to go, if we're going to get more Mario movies, or if they're going to kind of veer off from that and try original stories and then make games off those, or what. You know, we kind of don't know where it's going to go, but I think all you got to know is the Super Mario Bros. Movie, absolutely solid. You will be easily entertained. And until next time, bye. Thank you for listening to Easily Entertained with me, Bryson Olson. If you enjoyed, be sure to tune back Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, really anywhere you get your podcasts. And if you want all the latest updates on all things entertaining, join us on social media at Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. And until next time, this is Easily Entertained.